Hello and welcome to the State of Human Design. It is 4:24 p.m. on Monday, April 26th, 2021.
Here we are.
Yeah, I was thinking we would answer some questions from the Human Design and Astrology Facebook group, just to kick things off. And we can talk about what's new in human design, what's been going on, what have we been thinking about, what are the trends, That's what I like. I like keeping up, I'm not really very good at it, actually, at keeping up with the trends, but I like it. I like kind of going in there and seeing what's happening and seeing the trend. And then I get, inundated by it and pushed away by it. But I like to periodically, I don't know, I have this love-hate relationship with the trend, the time. It's like...
You're a purely collective person, right?
Exactly, yeah. So, Pokemon Go came out. I'm all about it, That's what pulled me out of my Sacral Awakening experience. Before that, I was walking around all zen, and then Pokemon Go came out. I'm like, gotta catch them all.
How do you access the trends with something like Human Design?
I guess I just mean the trends in human design, and seeing where it's going, seeing, news. Human design news would be an example.
Yeah, but where do you get human design news? Facebook?
Facebook, but more now Instagram, and it's because a lot of these Instagram people have found me, and then thank you all for doing that, and they've added me to this group. You're in the group too.
Huh?
Right?
On Facebook?
No, on Instagram.
Oh, sorry.
2027 mutation group, and always posting
stuff.
Oh,
yeah. The 2027 WTF.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm so happy that they added us to the group. So thank you everyone. But yeah, I get information there. I get information now. I'm actually following a bunch of Instagram human design accounts. I didn't until a month ago. Let's see. And then, yeah, Facebook. So Facebook is definitely, you see a trend in conversations and things. Periodically, I'll look in the news. Periodically, I'll check the Reddit. It's been a long time. You've been more on the Reddit.
Sometimes, yeah. I basically just see what makes it to the default Reddit homepage for me.
I did not follow the Reddit because it was just too hard for me. Also, I don't really use. I just go to specific subreddits. I don't really use the homepage feature.
It still has a pretty strong reputation, it sounds like. I don't really engage with it that much, but
the human design Reddit. That blows my mind, because whenever I would check a couple years ago, so I am interested just from a historical, movement standpoint, very much like Jan van Denberg. Jan van Denberg has done the most complete history of human design anyone's ever put together.
Wow.
You've seen
it.
Yeah, Ra's work. You've seen it. It's great.
The play-by-play of everything he produced.
Play-by-play of everything Ra produced. But it's also interesting just to see the reception of human design, the history of the reception of human design. For instance, when it was brought to the Jungians in the early 90s by someone who graduated from the Zurich Institute, by Jürgen, I believe.
Oh, cool. Oh, that guy.
And he brought, I'm pretty sure. Nice. Please correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe I have so many third lines. But it's all in Jan's work. But human design was presented to Jungians in the Jung Institute in Zurich, and even though Jung basically discovered the design, and much of Jung's work of individuation, not necessarily, I guess Freud.
By discovering the unconscious.
But I think he really discovered it in its true nature, I should say, not as a leftover receptacle or something, but as a double soul, as an other soul.
Came to meet it on its own terms to the best of its ability.
And the first one to consciously do so, in some sense, with Nietzsche being kind of the unconscious predecessor. So it's so funny that you see the fractal lines and you see the development, and how after the impact of Jung, there's just the reflection of the impact, then there's the echo of the reflection, then there's the reverb of the echo, then there's the decay of the reverb, and at each level it gets less and less and less and less of the real thing. And by the time of the 90s, they couldn't recognize the real thing, because the mutative, Jung would have recognized it. If you brought him human design, he would have studied it. Because that's where he was. He was already studying all sorts of paranormal in his search for the self, and for individuation, and for this other way of living, and so on. So, the nine-centered way of life, you could say. The nine-centered habitus. But I like seeing it for human design too. I definitely I go back and forth where sometimes I'll just be completely out of the loop. I think what it really is that I have to have a project relevant. My project has to be somehow relevant to a certain community, and now it is, because now I'm doing this YouTube, and now I have all these followers, and I don't really know what to do, because I'm making these videos, and I think you're the same. I mean, you're doing content and or talking to all these people all the time, doing human design readings. It's for a different reason. Like, the reason I'm doing the practice is ultimately selfish, I hate to say. It's to make sure I know it. It's to develop my own mastery in the system. And it's to have a large enough sample size and enough, that I can actually validate for myself my own mastery of that system. That's all it is.
Because everything you have undefined, you're here to learn about, right?
Well, yeah, exactly, and it's been incredible to see that. But then when it comes to the different positions in the human design world, like, I see people on the front lines, and I've been on the front lines a lot, and it's really exciting to see, but it's also so demoralizing. Like, I see Dive In, on the Human Design and Astrology group on the front lines. Now, on the one hand, new people coming into human design is the most exciting thing in the world for me. For me, when I meet someone, it's typically in real life. People can talk to me online, that's fine, but online is a time suck, and I like real life. I just, the more human design stuff happens through aura, right, than in any, I don't really sit around waiting to respond to somebody to message me on Facebook, you know what I mean? So, but besides that, I would say that, even if we are online friends, that's great too, because online friends are a path to real life friends. And so if you're in Santa Fe, come say hi. If I'm in your part of the world, I'll stop in. And that's kind of an exciting way of looking at it too. But I see people on the front lines. I've been on the front lines a lot myself. Sometimes I dive back in, again, to hone my skills. And it's not that I am saying people shouldn't be on the front lines. And I also love welcoming newcomers into human design. It's just that when you look at far enough down the fractal line, I'm going to be showing here in a second, we're going to be reading questions, and I'm not trying to make fun of these people. We're going to read questions from Human Design and Astrology, and we're just going to talk about them. But you will see for yourself that not everybody who says they're into human design is really into human design, and not everybody who's in a Human Design and Astrology group actually has really any interest in human design.
Yeah, that's very
Some of them only have interest in astrology, or they don't even have interest in much in astrology. Some people are just only interested in their own things, and they're actually, and so it's so messy once you get to a certain level away. It's almost like there's a nice barrier. I'm understanding why second lines would have so many walls. It's nice to have a barrier to make people break through, so that you don't just waste your time on just noise.
Totally,
yeah. So, and you do have that barrier. So Mike is a 6'2", of course, and has not on Facebook, not on any of these groups.
That's true. I am a little hard to reach.
Yeah, and for me, I lurk in these groups, but then every now and then I jump in and post, usually out of some sort of priestly outrage. I stand on my soapbox and I rant, and then I go back behind my curtain. That's
I get caught in that trap sometimes. So I'm trying to do that less.
Okay, well, yeah, as you're going farther and farther under the roof. Okay, so let's see some of the. All right, 1 hour ago, this is from the admin founder of the group Human Design Astrology, Kevin. Scorpio full moon is almost here and already charging things up for good and bad. Some folks are expressing concern or wondering what's wrong right now with the stars. Don't say it's wrong, basically. It's kind of like saying a pile of wood is wrong, because it's in the way, it attracts spiders. What can you do, though? You can burn the wood, you can sell the wood. It's a resource. So I guess he's saying Scorpio full moon is a resource. I hope things get more right for you all, but you are responsible for that.
Oh.
Here's a pretty neat article I found to help. Knowing's half the battle. It affects everyone differently. Okay, there's an article which we're not going to read, but it's full moon in Scorpio is inviting you to embrace change. Here's what you're saying. Okay. Any comments?
Well, the full moon in Scorpio is Wesak every year. The full moon of Taurus season is sometimes called the Buddha's birthday, the holiest day of the year in the Buddhist world. And because The Buddha was said to be born on the full moon of Taurus season, whatever year that was.
Really? So the Buddha was born on a Scorpio full moon?
Yeah.
That is dope.
And I suspect that it was probably on the 1-2 axis that when the Buddha was born, just because that's so in keeping with his character at gates 1 and 2. You know what I mean? And 2, in the very middle of Taurus season, when the sun enters gate 2, is a really important turning point, because you begin a whole half-year hemisphere of the wheel where every gate begins with a yin line.
That is right.
Gate 2 is purely
it's
yin.
the pure yin,
Yeah.
so it's the marker for the quarter, the whole quarter. In the same way, then that its opposition would be pure yang.
I don't know what gates the full moon is. See that? Sometimes it falls obviously on the 1 and 2. This time of year.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, no, that is. I love that information. I mean, so that would be like that would actually be so. But I'm sad to say, in the context of this thread, that would probably fall on deaf ears. Like, I love that insight. It's just I feel like, learning human design or really getting into any world or any system, they are based on a real scene, and the scene really does have a vocabulary. And it's like, if you want to play jazz, you can't just play jazz on your own. You actually have to be in that scene or collaborate with those people. And I've had little tastes of that as a jazz piano player myself, and having some, the rhythmacy from having recorded with some artists of but I'm not on the scene in the way that I would have to be if I were doing jazz piano all the time. And there's a whole vocabulary that I can speak, and I've learned, enough to be like an insider in the jazz world to a degree. But even my insiderness in the jazz world is nowhere near, it's like, it's a vocabulary that you develop, or a taxonomy, or a system, so that when you're talking to me about, the quarters, and the quarters are starting with yin lines, this is incredibly interesting for me, even if I don't fully know what it means, because part of the metaphysical research program, when you undertake your human design experiment, you're really entering into this metaphysical research program. Part of that experiment is to adopt the vocabulary, to say these are certain buckets, and yin is a bucket and yang is a bucket, and the quarters are going to be buckets, and we're going to look at the double yin foundation, and we're going to look at the double yang, and then we're going to look at the yin yang and the yang yin, and you have these 4 buckets, one for each quarter. The quarters of mind, and the quarters of civilization, duality, and mutation or death, all this stuff. What is it? I guess the quarter of mind is quarter of mutation. Anyway, so we have these quarters, we have these names for them, we accumulate. I mean, this is why I don't even really get that annoyed when Karen Curry Parker or someone is using new words, like she was calling 27 accountability, and then Barbara Chung, who's a kind of outspoken, angry manifester, who's called me out for misrepresenting the 4th line, started calling out Karen Curry Parker for accountability, saying even the Gene Key's use of the term altruism was more appropriate. And then I called out, call out culture, call out. No, then I retorted that actually, no, altruism seems very collective, and if you look up the textbook definition of accountability is a very tribal thing, and it has to do with caring that it's like the 27 is the ultimate, make sure you wear your coat when you go out in the rain. And that's accountability. They're accountable to themselves to make sure that they're holding themselves accountable to make sure to hold the other person accountable. It's two-way accountability. It's the mother who says, even though it's actually the fathering channel, which is kind of funny, but it would conventionally be the mother in the stereotypical, heteronormative role that goes, make sure you don't get cold, make sure you don't catch cold, Sonny, Jimmy, make sure when you go out and play with Spot, you put your coat on, and that is Gate 27 in a nutshell. And so Karen Curry Parker, calls it accountability. Gene Keys calls it altruism. Barbara Chung prefers Gene Keys. My point is, none of these really bother me, even Gene Keys. And I said last week, I said it to our friend, and she goes, Can I get that on record? Can you say that again? I want to record you saying that, because I said I'm not even bothered by Gene Keys, and she knows how much I rant about Gene Keys all the time. But but I really mean what I mean by that is, I totally I approve of making your own name for something, creating your own metaphysical research program, taking human design, what you like of it, and leaving behind what you don't, and calling that your thing, and that's fine. I'm not going to study your thing. I mean, unless you come up with some really crazy cool stuff. I always check out everybody's thing. I check out Gene Key's. I check out Steve Rhodes. He has his own thing where, hey, guess what? The transference is just as good as there's no such thing as transference. And like, you're just as comfortable in caves as you are in mountains. And he's a 6'3", you know, it's very like innocent, nothing matters. Strategy and authority, like if there's really no choice, it doesn't really matter anyway, right? It's like this nihilistic version of no choice. Versus like the subjectively engaged version of no choice that I kind of aspire to. But in any case, yeah, it's so. Yeah, I want to circle back for 1 second though, because I just think I guess so. Just to close my loop on what it is to have a vocabulary. Every system has a vocabulary and so on. I love that when I come to you, you know, this is because you really are in the Human Design Metaphysical Research Program that I come to you with stuff about Scorpio full moon from this guy in the Human Design Astrology group. By the way, the admin on the group. And I come to you with this, and your immediate reaction is to do a bunch of human design analysis on it. I love that because my immediate reaction is like, screw this guy. It makes me want to quit. It makes me want to like revolt and say, get rid of him. Because it's like propaganda. Because I immediately see the conditioning.
Yeah.
I mean, he literally says, I hope things get more right for you all, but you are responsible for that. I mean, what the?
That is a little
like, it's like no choice, mofo. And then he goes, Scorpio full moon is almost here and already charging things up for good and bad. Some folks expressing concern, wondering what's wrong. And his whole point is, it's very homogenized outer authority. His whole point is, you know, look at things in terms of right and wrong. That's a small-minded way of looking at it. If you look at it in terms of right or wrong, that's like calling a pile of wood right or wrong. Why don't you think about how you can use it? Because it's ultimately up to you. And if you can't find a way to use it, it's your fault. Whatever. You know, it's like this mind propaganda. Okay, let's see. Comments. Yeah, nobody's talking about no mention of human design, except finally Pluto came up, and then he wrote Pluto is truth. So that was nice.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Okay, next post, super full moon in Scorpio. Okay. Trying to find some good questions. Scorpio full moon tonight, lighting up. Mad transits. Okay. Do you work with your tropical chart or sidereal? In tropical, I am sacral authority generator, and sidereal, I am reflector. Not sure what to work with as I feel both ways. Any tips? That was 4 hours ago. No one's touching that one. We're so tired of that question. Okay, I mean, there is one response, but it's just a link to the human design system.
Cool.
Okay. Let's see. Someone looking for someone who has a similar chart. Anyone else with a similar chart? My mind and body separately are reflectors, but together I'm an emotional manifester. At first I didn't feel like a manifester. Okay, so this person's saying that they... I don't know why that they would point out that their mind and body are both reflectors. I mean, it's kind of like there's interesting things that are the focus, too. Like, I don't mean to totally knock this. It's more just like the kinds of things that are being focused on themselves are indicative of a certain level of the fractal. And I don't even want to say it's bad, because like I've had to fight my way up the fractal, I guess, if that makes sense. I've had to fight my way closer to the mutation. And in fact, that's what I'm always doing by trying to...
Can you tell us what time it is?
It is 4:43.
Huh?
4:43.
4:43?
Yeah, it's just like... Well, I mean, you know, it's just a lot of... Let's see if there's any good ones. Okay, here's a good one. Question for manifesting generators. Okay, so this would be a good one. This is one that we could actually try to answer. For the most part, most manifesting generators I know seem filled with energy, but I know two who seem to be really low energy and are very non-functional. What can make a manifesting generator struggle with energy?
Misapplication of their energy. Isn't the whole thing with any type of generator that you convert excess amount of energy into the illusion of being tired?
Oh wow, converting excess energy. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, converting. That's a great way to put it. Converting excess energy into the illusion of being tired. That's fantastic. I mean, yeah, it's like, and maybe even to themselves. I mean, the way I look at it is the broken down generator, who doesn't. It's really hard to get a sacral awakening because it's like a crusted over rejected sacral. It's like an ossified, outmoded sacral response. And a lot of this is very compatible with Jungian individuation, all of these things. In fact, I do have one little rant, which I would like to go into. I thought of it when the admin Kevin posted this thing about how it's all your choice.
Okay.
And I guess, let me tell you, I got to put it together for a second, because I do have a way of telling this story. Okay, what no choice really means is kind of like what Lacan discovered with subjective destitution, which robs the pre-analytic subject of their fantasies of being not too good, not too bad, normal people, blah, 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 all these fantasies about their life. So, Lacan talks about the subjective destitution experience of being robbed of your fantasmatic supports, which is a fancy way of saying your fantasies about yourself in the world. And what this results in is the formation of the post-analytic subject. For Lacan, this is someone who has no illusions about themselves in the world. Now, this is one version of it. It might not be the whole picture. Jung, on the other hand, has his own version of individuation, whereby you integrate the shadow, which is to withdraw your projections and realize that your competition, which increases the more similar another person of the same gender identity of you is, whatever that gender identity happens to be, you become competitive with that person. And the competition with that person, that conflict, leads to hopefully the growth of consciousness, which incorporates the shadow and then moves on to the relationship with the anima or the animus or the animx, as I've been calling it. Right?
It's healthy to have the rivalry?
Well, that tension leads to the necessity for a third thing to evolve, which is an emergent attitude of embracing the opposite also. And so you, in some sense, learn to live with that in a healthy state of tension.
Cool. That's like a smaller version of what the whole juxtaposition thing is about.
He calls it the minor piece and then the masterpiece. The shadow is the minor work, and the animx is the master work. And then there's other versions. Hillman has his kind of non-linear, he has his more like Michel Serres version. If you read Michel Serres, the Troubadour of Knowledge, where his whole theory of identity and of self and of knowledge and of everything is basically, that has to do with how we interact in the world and habit and so on, is this sort of bricolage, or he uses the figure of harlequin, who has a quilted coat of a million different pieces and so on. And so, you see James Hillman, a much more Serresian, also kind of a Derridian for people who follow Jacques Derrida, where it's, a little bit more experimental. But these are like different vocabularies, different metaphysical research programs and so on, different practices, sets of practices that are all getting at interacting with the design or the unconscious in some sense. But ultimately what it is it is opinionated, it's directed, it's oriented. And what it's oriented towards is the subjective destitution experience. Like when Jung almost died, or when Ra went through 7 years of his, fasting and all sorts of stuff to have his experience with the voice, or the 7-year deconditioning process, which people always come to me with their incarnation cross, and I kind of secretly grin to myself, because the way I like to interpret incarnation cross is what your deconditioning will look like. Because we don't really know what else is going to look like, but we know that the cross of healing is going to get really freaking sick, and we know that the sleeping phoenix is going to burn everything to the ground, and so each of these types is going to have some sort of series of crises over 7 years from when they start human design. So I'll sometimes kind of grin to myself when someone thinks human design is going to bring them money and wealth and solutions to their relationship problems. That's why I love Chaitanya FX, who has these great sardonic memes. It's, oh my God, but it's not necessarily, but you don't actually feel alienated with human design. You actually feel true friendship, because as Deleuze puts it about friendship, and ultimately about conversation, what real conversation is in ellipses. It is in shorthand. There's no conversation without ellipses. If you can't with someone, they don't understand you.
Totally,
You can't,
right?
right?
Yeah.
So discussion and argument and all of this other stuff is farther out the fractal line, you could say. It's in a different echelon of a public sector, but where the actual private mutation happens in those conversations is actually, so that's why I do have a lot of empathy. I here's why I go, just to circle back for a second, here's why I go on those outer fractal line groups, is to try to find someone from the outer fractal line to pull in.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
That's what I'm doing. I'm looking out, and I think a reflector could do that really well. Reflectors know who's mutative, but I'm going out there to find someone who's new to human design to pull in with the real info, and then pretty soon they're not on those groups doing that anymore. They're in the real groups, and they're with the real people asking the real questions.
You're calling them in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for me, the main thing when I see a manifesting generator with low energy, because usually I see the opposite problem. They're the most annoying. You have to swat them away. Usually they're just, hey, or a bridging gate on the throat for a generator, which is almost the same thing.
Yeah.
But, usually you have to kind of swat them away. But if you actually see one that's really, really down in the dumps, first, are they emotionally defined? If so, there's your answer. They're just really low emotionally.
Yeah.
They're the really low emotional wave. Second, if they're not emotionally defined, who are they around? Are they around somebody who's emotionally defined? Take that off the list. Okay, they've been living alone in a cabin. There's no crazy transits, whatever. Third, I guess, transits. Fourth, okay, you really look at, there's no emotional explanation for it. It's not emotion. It's actual, like, they just do not have the energy to do anything.
What about individual circuitry and
Okay, perfect. Fifth, individual circuitry and melancholy. That's a great thing to look for. You can make a little checklist. If they have individual circuitry, say they're a 360 or something, or any of the individual really, they could be caught in a melancholic mode where they're just not in the mood to use their energy. But let's say it's none of those things. Let's say that they really are just lying around in bed, they have chronic fatigue syndrome, they have no energy, right? And they're just a pure 3420, not a generator with manifesting potential.
All right.
So that makes it really hard, right? It's like, what could be the cause? What could be the cause? Okay, Adam Phillips explains it really well. He says there's actually, and this might be where I might actually I'm always knocking Buddhism and Buddhist monks and stuff, but this one kind of makes sense. He said I forget who it was, but I think it was a Buddhist monk, who wouldn't say, how are you doing? He would say, how are your appetites lately?
Cool, that's a great line.
Like, how are your appetite? How's your your appetites for different things? Oh, I've been loving film. I've been really getting into these movies.
That's great.
Oh, I've revitalized my interest in classical music. I've been writing a sonata. How are your appetites? Or, oh, I've completely lost all taste for the opera. I can't stand jazz bass. I used to love it, and now it comes on and I want to cry. Whatever. And so it's like, how are your appetites? That's such an interesting thing. Well, the appetites for the sacral, because there's all different kinds of appetites, I'm sure, for all different centers and so on, but the appetites for the sacral are what it responds to. And what it can happen is it can go into a sort of protest mode from being enslaved for so long. See, the 3420 is kind of the super slave of the world. There's two projector channels and one MG, the only real MG channel, that are the opposition channels, which are 10 and a half days a year plus, right? They're guaranteed over 10 days a year of people being born with that definition, because those definitions are oppositions on the wheel. So 5.7 days, it's actually 11. So 5.7 days of the year, the sun's going to be there and the earth's going to be in the other. And then vice versa, 6 months later. And that happens for the 4323, the 3740, and for the 3420.
And then you could have it on the design side as well.
Oh, that's a good point. Right, so actually the Sun, Earth, so it makes 22 days. I never even thought of that, the design side. So really there's a bunch of, obviously, like 5-1 CrossFit masks, I've known two of them, and they have the 4323 on their design. So you're actually getting, oh my God, you're getting 11.4 times 2, you're getting 22.8 days a year. Of guaranteed MGs. And you're getting 22.8 days a year of 4323s, and 22.8 days a year of guaranteed 3740s, people who really want to be a part of a whole. But you can see that the 3740s and the 4320s, I don't remember which is which, but Ra calls them the priests and the kings or something, the politicos and the priests, the two different sides of rulership that have kind of connived with each other.
I just found out that there's a cross that has them both.
Oh, really?
The cross of do duality, maybe something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Isn't
That's
that weird?
so
So you
funny.
could, your personality Sun Earth, I think, could be the 3740, and then the design Sun Earth could be the 3420.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, that's so interesting. But it shows their relationship, and this is the kind of research we need in human design. This because human design is a metaphysical research program, and we need to be uncovering information like this so you can use it to then extract meaning. What does it mean to have that relationship? Well, what does it mean for the incarnation process? They have a relationship to both sides of the rulership and the guidance of humanity. Well, conventionally, the 4323 is the one that can really guide the 3420. That's what Ross says. If you are a 3420 MG, find a 4323 to guide you, because they are the perfect projector for you.
That's cool.
A 4323 projector. But 3740, I guess is a little off to the side. I'm not really sure why that would be. But in any case, he calls the 3420, the manifesting generators, really just the kind of slaves of the world that have been enslaved by the world. And part of that being enslaved, if you're a pure 3420 and you don't have the 10 and you don't have the 57, then you have no idea what you're doing. You're doing stuff all the time without any idea. You're just, I experience that periodically when I get the 20. I have somebody who has a 20, and they have the 20 and I have the 34. We're doing stuff. We have no idea what we're doing, but somehow we're making it work, But it's nothing, and it has nothing to do with you, because the 10 really means it's about you as a person. But when you find a 3420 that doesn't have the 10 and doesn't have the 57, that just means that they're just work for everybody, for everything, for nobody, for nothing, for every reason and for no reason. They're just constantly busy. They don't really know what they're busy with. They don't know why they're busy. They don't really know what they're doing, because you have to have 57 to really know what you're doing. It's just the doing. You're just getting the doing in the now. I have 34 with no 20, so I have the doing. I am a workhorse for doing, but I queue it up. Some things that I want to do now, I'm not going to do until 6 months from now, because that's how long it takes me, and somebody with 3420 would just do it now. But for me, I put it off because it's very expensive for me to context switch, and the cost of context switching makes it so I can't continually do new things now.
That must be tough for people who have the 3420, but then are also emotionally defined.
Well, they're just constantly, I know a lot of people with that, they're just constantly doing things all the time. You can stay busy, but also that's just the quality of the 3420 when it's not necessarily following its true sacral response. Remember that there's this kind of idea that when you're following sacral response, you're really letting the body, or really the sacral, the sacral is honestly the ovaries in women. It's like letting the ovaries decide. For men, it's the testes. It's a kind of unusual way to think of it. Now, obviously, it's a psychological and a linguistic construct as well. There's a linguistic component to sacral response. There's, it works on multiple levels. I would wager that a personality-defined sacral is probably more linguistically triggered by certain words. And they respond to those words or to those descriptions. Whereas a physical may even be sacrally responsive by getting touched by something, or bumping into it, or touching it, or if it's touch cognition, or smelling it, or tasting it, breathe, however it works depending on the different kinds of cognition. But yeah, being an emotionally defined, manifesting generator is, half of the 22 days a year are already going to be emotionally defined days just by statistics. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons, but I could say it's that 3420s can get really enslaved, and be totally enslaved to other people. I see them getting enslaved mostly to manifestors and to projectors. They typically will get married or in a long-term relationship with a manifestor or a projector who will just completely run their life till they just go, okay, and then it doesn't matter what gender you are, it doesn't matter any of the other details. I've seen it happen in all different directions. Of course, projectors, I'm sure, can be in bad relationships where they've been. It could probably happen both ways too.
That subservience seems so inherently contradictory to the whole integration circuitry self-preservation thing.
Yeah, a lot of 3420s I don't really see as subservient. I see them as actually much more like scrappy survivors who do anything.
Isn't that what they're supposed to be?
Yeah, no, but I'm not, okay, I'll try to think of an actual 3420 that I've seen do this, but I guess they're never going to be, okay, I can think of one, because I was not thinking of a 3420 then, I was thinking of a pure generator in that case. When I was thinking of that example. I have a number of pure generators. And split definition generators in particular, although single def skill can happen too. I was thinking of just, and I don't mean to, I mean, you're a projector. You can tell me if you've ever felt like you've been in a relationship. I think projectors get it too. They can't get out of the relationship.
Oh, yeah.
They're stuck in it because they're waiting to be invited out of it or something by somebody else or something else that, or just to be able to leave the relationship. It's very weird for projectors to enter in and leave things. It's kind of big for them to do it, I feel like. Not that it's not for everybody, but yeah, I guess the complexity of it. So leaving beside the whole like being a super slave to other people, the 3420s I've known, yeah, I mean, even if they're single, say, they might just have so much conditioning. I mean, to really enter into the human design experiment for them would be to really wait and not initiate anything, and to just have a radically different approach to life, where everywhere they go, they're not, like, they see somebody they know that walks by, they don't go over and say, hey, because that's what they immediately want to do, right? They immediately want to initiate. The second they see somebody, they want to go shout at them, and I've seen it, like, there's a guy, it was funny, I got his human design at the end of hanging out, but I knew he was a 3420, because as we were hanging out, literally in the middle of talking, I'm talking at this pace, at this tempo, he's talking too, we're having a nice conversation, and things would happen. Something would happen, immediately jump up and just run, and say, sorry, just 1 second, and he would just run across the room, and he would have to talk to somebody he saw walking by or something. This is outside of Better Day, so there's a real, like, Santa Fe hangout where you could just, even during COVID, everyone has masks on, but you still would see people walk by, So
I've definitely seen 3420s do that. That's very cool.
Oh, yeah. They love. Now,
they're always on to the next.
Yeah. So to really see a third, now, so maybe this person's not a 3420, in which case it's more common, but even 3420s, they can get broken down. They can totally get broken down. I mean, there's so many things that can break people.
Oh, yeah, I forgot the original question.
Well, the original question is about MGs being broken down.
Yeah.
What can cause it? What causes burnout? I mean, maybe they're a fourth line. Maybe they're sick of people, Maybe they're fatigued. But there can be a lot of reasons. But I do think there is like a sacral atrophy thing that happens in the way that Adam Phillips talks about loss of appetite, right? So loss of appetite would be like losing the appetites for things. And then Deleuze talks about really loss of affect, by which he means the same thing. The loss of affective capacity, the loss of the capacity to do something you used to be able to do. And formerly you could experience that or feel that or do that, even at a functional level. The knife used to be able to cut, now it's too dull. It's lost the affective capacity to cut. Now all it can do is signify or something, But but this whole idea of losing capacities and losing the capacity to feel, you don't lose the sacral response, you lose the capacity to have the sacral response be triggered by a certain thing.
Interesting.
Right?
That makes sense,
And they're all fragile. Before I knew human design, I talked about it in terms of libido and how much you had to protect your libido. And using my inferior sensing for the personality type people who know that, it was very much a sexual metaphor of almost losing your mojo, you could say, losing your vitality or your arousal towards life. Now, I don't think that we need a crude metaphor like that, but I think that in some sense I was onto something. Even before I knew human design, the conclusion I had come to through studying Jung was that it was so important to protect your appetites, basically your ability to be aroused by certain things, your ability to be passionate about certain things, which means I love jazz piano so much, I'm protective of it, and I have to be careful of it. It's like Nick Cave when he refused the Video Music Award. He said, my muse, could spook.
Right, cool.
And so I'm
true.
going to reject this music award because my muse is not meant to race. She may be a horse, but if she is, I'm going to treat her as a, mystical magic pony, not force her to go in the race or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a really great attitude of protecting your appetites and protecting your affective capacities, because for Deleuze and for Deleuzian ethics, the only real tragedy is the loss of affective capacity. Right? So when you lose, and death is the ultimate loss of affective capacity. But someone who has a broken down sacral, nothing will get them out of bed, everything sucks.
Yeah.
By the way, check if they have any hanging gates in the format gates, in the format channels. Yeah. We were just talking about that, how depression can be caused by hanging gates. Yeah, by having a format channel. Should we go on to the next?
Sure.
Next question. Okay. See how we're doing on time so far. Cool. We got 40 minutes so far. This is great.
Wow.
Maybe
How long do you want to make this?
Like an hour. An hour, is that cool? 20 more minutes?
Okay.
If you got anything you want to talk about before the end of the hour. Okay. I'm new here, astrologer. I don't know anything about. I don't know a lot about human design. Do you have any sources to start reading? Where can I obtain my graphic? So what do you think is the best place to start?
To get resources for learning about, for self-educating with human design. I don't know. Where do you go? I think you got to know people. That's what I had to do.
Yeah, knowing people in conversation is great.
Yeah.
There are YouTube videos by Alok on the gates,
Those are really good.
Oh my god, that's like such a gift. Like he's giving away just so much great knowledge. I love his analyses of the gates and how much.
When I was gonna say, when people ask this question on Reddit, a lot of the time people refer to you. People say.
Yeah, I don't think I'm really
YouTube
intro.
search
I'm not like an intro person. I'm a let's hang out and talk about this thing that we're all studying together.
You do make it very accessible in conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Practical.
I mean,
that's the
yeah, I do try to. I have to find a way to make it practical for myself. It's like I don't like Zizek says, if he can't explain it to a 5-year-old, he doesn't believe that he understands it.
Right.
So, although for me, I don't try to. I mean, I don't try to dumb it down. I'm trying to. I actually talk to people at the level where, but my strategy is not to ever try to simplify anything. It is to talk to people at a level of jargon that they just will have to look up what those words mean. And that's how I've always believed language should be deployed, if we want to use a fancy word for it, is, it's not exclusionary to do that. It's actually inclusionary because you're including people in the way that you would talk to your friends.
Totally.
So if I talk to my friends and I use a lot of high IQ words or whatever, and then for me to try to, but also it's gate 12, right? It's like the extreme polarity. If I use a lot of high IQ words or whatever, right? Gate 12 sometimes can go between, I think people notice that it can be like the most crude, simplistic, monosyllabic thing, or the most articulate, extravagant.
Totally.
Nietzsche must have had gate 12. He had such a mutative effect. So what was our question? Oh yeah, sources. HD tools. If you Google HD tools, or it might even be like human design tools.
Oh, they are good. Yeah.
They
For
are
reading
just
about
fantastic.
channels.
So easy. This like really nice, UI.
A lot of quotes from Ra, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's so that's fantastic. You can buy the books in Human Design America, but they're overpriced, and I will die on that flag or whatever they call it.
I agree. I have also a lot of convictions.
Jinhua, what's up? Lower your prices. You're charging $300 for something that people can find unscribed in 2 seconds and then print themselves at a Kinko's. It's not cool. It's it's old information. It needs to get out there. So funny. Everyone drives by this way, and the screen can't see it, but people drive by throughout this whole thing, and we just have to like smile at them and wave for them and talk to them. They're like the off-screen street. Yeah. It's fantastic. Yeah, I love that this state of human design is just so great for just being able to just like rant about stuff. Like Human Design America books are overpriced.
You need an outlet.
Yeah, I bought them on eBay used, and they were still overpriced, but it was more reasonable. But it's like I'm against it for academic works, and I'm against it for human design. It's overpriced gatekeeping to charge $300 for a book. Like the markup for the book, and first of all, the printings are not very good. You can get really nice, high quality. You could get local printers in Santa Fe to do it. Then if you're charging $300 for a book, you're actually paying a local bookbinder $100 or $200 of those dollars. That's fantastic, and you're doing an heirloom edition book and stuff. This is just like cheap print on demand, China, made in China, whatever. I don't know. It doesn't. It's not good quality, and it's kind of an embarrassment.
It bugs me because I see it as cynical and anti-human, because I see so plainly how much this knowledge can help people, and it seems like we should all be doing everything we can to make it.
It's really well, and I have a hard time with I love my manifestors, and one of my best friends is manifestors, but it's like I also see a real manifestor attitude in that. Of just like not like even like the restriction of information as a form of the non-informing thing. Like, I have no obligation for you to
good
have this
point.
information.
Yeah.
I have no obligation to bring this information to you.
Wow.
And then just leave me alone, leave me in peace. Don't try to get this information from me.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, but they're not going to get peace because people are going to be angry at them
Yeah.
because they're spreading anger.
Yeah.
You know, because
Really
they're not
good point.
informing, they're not spreading the information, they're hoarding information. You know.
I can tell you how impersonally angry I got when Genetic Matrix started charging me to access my Rolodex.
Another
of so many
manifester,
clients.
another manifester,
Yeah.
exactly. John is such an idiot. I got to rant about John for a second. He still calculates charts wrong. If you're calculating your chart on Genetic Matrix, stop. Don't you know? Or email him and say, hey, by the way, why do you think time zones are different from the way everybody else does? Because I calculated your chart on my body graph, and it was different than on Genetic Matrix. It doesn't happen for everyone. It happens a lot in Europe in like the 1950s. So, I mean, it might not affect everyone, but believe me, if you're using them and you're doing readings for people and you're doing, you know, you want accurate information.
You don't want to have to find out you're wrong about it later.
Yeah, I mean, the only way I would say if you really want to keep using Genetic Matrix, just double check the GMT every time. It's the same thing as UTC. So if it says UTC or if it says GMT, double check that with your GMT, your actual GMT. Like, I was born September 25th at 8:48 p.m. in Boston, Massachusetts, Malden actually, and that is 0:48 a.m. September 26th in UTC and in GMT because they're the same. Okay, had to get that rant out of the way. Oh yeah, so HD Tools is really good. Human Design Tools. Jovian Archive Signature Series talks are really good. I point people to the talk for their type. So if they're a generator, you know, so on. I really wish that the talks on profile were still on YouTube. They're not great for some of the profiles because Ra talks about the second lines being bigoted and what bigots they are, and he talks about the first lines and how insecure they are and how problems and this and that. And, you know, like, I love them. I think they're fantastic, but some of the types he's not great with. I mean, he talks about 6'2s as like the most sexually assaulted. I mean, he says some pretty complex things. Yeah, I mean, you know, so if somebody's just getting into human design and you send, and they're 6'2", and you send them that talk, they're like, by the way, like, you know, it's not exactly the best intro materials. But for the transitional profiles, I mean, he does kind of go short on those, but even just for the 5-1, that one is mind-blowing. His talk on the 5-1 in the profile talks. For you out there, it's the one that's usually called the 12 profiles. It's just his, you know, he talks about at the beginning of, well, we're on a 5th line day, or now we're on a 6th line day.
Well, so how do you find them now if they're taken down?
Well, you have to buy them,
Oh,
right? Or, you know, or go to nefarious illicit means. But, you know, it's really a shame because those were fantastic introductory materials that were essentially on YouTube, you know, that were now taken down. There are definitely, let's see, so where would you go in the beginning? So, yeah, I kind of feel like giving Jovian Archive a penny is just so antithetical to the mutative spirit of human design at this point that I really never send anyone there, except for their free content, which I'm really glad they do provide.
Yeah.
The free content's great, and I'm happy they do that. Yeah. So I send people there for free content. Let's see, who's been... Well, I guess Facebook. I always say to check out the Facebook groups. Like, if you're getting into your PHS, there's a PHS group. You can search PHS stuff. PHS and environment, or PHS experiment. Do people also talk about environment? I don't know.
I sure wish there were some books.
Yeah, I mean...
Where are the books?
Well, I know, and, you know, it's hard writing a book. I mean, you have the channel of struggle, and so Mike writes so much more than I do, and I want to write, but, you know, undefined throat and whatever, and then, you know, not having the channel of struggle, it's so hard because I'm just like, I'm not designed to struggle towards this goal. But, you know, I know that there's great authors who don't have a channel of struggle. I just can't write in a way that is a struggle. It has to kind of flow. But I've been really wanting the Human Design Deconditioning guide to come out this summer, and I think there's a pretty good chance it will.
Your book? Cool.
Well, yeah, because I already have so much material for it already organized. I mean, I just gather and concentrate and organize, and once the material's there, I put it out. That's how I've always done my albums.
That's what Zizek does.
Yeah, that's what Zizek does too, and that's what I've always done for albums too. For albums, for music, I've always just gathered. It's a channel of concentration. I just gather it up until there's enough.
Yeah.
And so it's not really like, I realized I can't be the kind of writer I might want to be. because what your mind wants you to be is often what you're super attracted to. For instance, I'm so attracted to gate 22. If I meet a woman who has gate 22, particularly an undefined solar plexus, and we're hitting it off and talking, and it might not happen the first time we meet, but after the second or third or eighth time or whatever, it's built up enough for that 12-22, and I want that sort of like, and I guess it happens around men too, because human design is completely gender non-specific. I mean, it's so funny how all of my friends, my platonic friends, regardless of gender, who have gate 22, we still do friend date stuff. We totally do friend date stuff. Like me and Oscar, who was on a previous State of Human Design, are like cooking candlelit dinners together, like drinking bottles of wine together, and like, so we're still like creating the vibe together as friends. Yeah, but it's the channel of romance. I mean, it's ultimately, it's a little bit, it's nicer when you have that with someone where that romance can culminate. So, okay, so we answer a couple more. Are we getting close to our allotted? We have 10 minutes. Is there anything you want to talk about for the?
Not really. I'm enjoying the natural flow of this.
Well, I wanted to, quick comment on Karen Curry Parker. A lot of the younger HD people are being really annoyed with her work. I get it, because, I always kind of defended her, and I buy her books just because I wanted to see what she's writing, so I do I own multiple of her books, I own a Human Design, and I have her transit planners, and I have these, and I try to do them. I'll be like laying in my bathtub trying to like journal out her transit, like I actually do. I mean, because I like that stuff. I think it's fun that somebody has made interactive workbooks you can do cool. with Human Design, like whatever, But I see, like, I was saying to you, I was like, Karen Curry Parker's, like, I don't really like follow her, watch her videos a lot. I have low consume, so for objective personality people don't know that means, my consume is third. I'm not the best at keeping up on stuff. But anyway, I did like what she was saying recently. She was really going on more about the generators not giving up when you get frustrated. And I know there were some memes about, like, Karen Curry Parker's saying the exact opposite advice now, telling generators they should just follow their frustration, not their satisfaction. But it's like, no, she's not saying that. I mean, she's a generator. Like, she knows what it's like. And she knows that sometimes satisfaction's just around the corner. And you quit because you're not really following your sacral. What it means, you're initiating. Quitting is initiating. Stopping is initiating. Everything's initiating unless it happens through really through following a response where something happens and you are able to naturally, like, you're poised and ready for that thing.
Almost like walking towards it before you even realize what you're doing.
Yeah, or you've just been preparing for it without realizing. Like, you've been doing something that does prepare you in a way that might not seem to. Although that's probably more for second lines, because they're all prepared. Well, I guess first and second lines are both, right? First line is preparing through study.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as a generator, I think every generator has that experience of, like, how frustrating things can get right before the satisfaction, and how if you really are following that sacral response, it's such a strong sense of drive towards that satisfaction. The satisfaction will be so great that it doesn't matter. So it's kind of like if I think about, like, the level of satisfaction of one thing versus another, the level of satisfaction, like, say there's two different things, like, I have to make a choice. There are two things that I want to do that are both happening at the exact same time. There's someone like Marshall Allen of the Sun Ra Orchestra who's come to Santa Fe, who's leading the Sun Ra Orchestra at Whale Yard. And at the same time, across town at Meow Wolf, Zizek is giving a talk. I want to see both of them. Well, I mean, I might think I know what I want to do, but I really can't until it really does, the real situation proposes itself, because as long as it's in the imaginary, I'm not actually getting confronted with the real proposition. So I can't. But in that moment, I have to wait. I was talking a lot about determination in the last instance, the kind of Laruellian concept, which is similar to, maybe at one level, maybe it's not. I think people hate that it's this comparison, actually. I think Laruellians hate the comparison to lazy loading and programming where things aren't computed until the very last instant. Because the determination in the last instance probably means something else. I mean, it's the same way that, I don't want to go into it. It's a very complex French philosophy thing. But basically, I was just saying how, I think the programming paradigm is better explanation. It's like the sacral response happens at the last moment that it can happen. And the last moment that it could happen is the moment when the information accumulates enough. And it is about information.
When it's braced against something, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that bracing is the information buildup that corners it enough or narrows it down enough or has accumulated or gathered enough that it can spring into action. So they all work in a different way. I mean, there's not one way the sacral works. If you have a 360, it's working on a pulse. So in fact, all the formats have pulses of a sort. And the 952 has phases, and they all have phases, right? The format channels are going through, the cyclical or the periodic and so on. And then you have all the sacral gates, the sacral channels really, because it's the channel that causes the response. There's no sacral response, it's just a gate. The response is only in the channel, and that's really the life force energy, and that's actually the aura, and that's actually the thing that's responding. So seeing it as, the aura is responding through the life force energy, which is the channel, and the particular kind of response of that particular sacral definition, that can also, help to understand all of the nuance. And I can kind of see the difference in the 4629, where I do feel like if somebody invites me to something and I don't have enough information, my 4629 is fully conscious, and it loves to adventure, and it's constantly looking for new experiences and wants to share the experiences and so on. And if somebody invites me, and it's a penta channel, they invite me and 3 of our mutual friends, so it's a 5-person penta, and I like all of those people, and they describe linguistically what's going on and tell me enough information, I can have a sacral response purely from the linguistic phenomena. That's nice. In that sense. And I think that the sacral response is somewhat linguistic in that sense. Because, certain things can just sound really amazing. Like, if you were to describe to me, or, it is kind of like a mental sacral response in some sense.
Well, also the person in giving words to the thing, to what they're conceiving of the plan to be, they're starting to live that out imaginarily, and they are starting to emanate in other unconscious ways the experience of actually being there, doing that thing with you, right? So it's like you're listening to their words, but also your body's listening to their body. You're like seeing all these like micro body movements. You're like noticing how their pulse is changing. You're like noticing how their body temperature is changing. All this kind of stuff. Well,
and especially if I'm in aura and I'm getting so much auric information, I was just even thinking on the phone. A friend who's just like, "Hey, you want to go on this trip? Want to meet me?" At blah blah blah. Or someone sends you a text and they say, "What you do? I want to meet up here." But I mean, because it's interesting. I mean, definitely you can have sacral responses to all sorts of things, and what they really are, a lot of times, it's just ignoring things until you have to make a decision, and then, or it's waiting until the thing comes along. It's like waiting so long that you've forgotten what a sacral yes is, and then it comes along and you're like, how could I ever forget? It's like a funny thing in that way. Like a great example would be like, if I've been thrifting and I've been finding like some really killer stuff, like Comme des Garçons and like really amazing stuff, then my standard is so high that I'm not gonna like just get a normal thing. But if I, for so long I start to try to second guess myself, well, come on, this is kind of nice, and then I'm like, no, don't get it, because you didn't have a sacral response for it, right? Because I'm like trying to convince myself that it's pretty good, and then I like see something like, even if I don't even check the size, I don't check anything, it doesn't matter. Like I will find the person that this is for if it doesn't fit me, because $5 for a freaking $300 coat or something, I'm not gonna let pass up. Especially because it's so nicely made. I have so much touch in my, and it feels right. It doesn't matter what name brand it is or how good of a deal it is if it feels terrible or coarse or bad or whatever. I love luxurious touch fabrics and things, and But
other than the touch thing, you're saying so much of that is happening in the mind or through language or whatever.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, and I guess I'm just saying that I do think there's a linguistic aspect to sacral response. Like, I don't fully understand how it works, but it would make sense to me that it works holistically, because you can have definition through either personality or design.
Well, but also, isn't that specific tantric channel, doesn't that include the gate of saying yes? Is it one of those gates?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it's the gate of committing. I mean, it's the gate of commitment of energy or not. And it's commitment of energy for an experience. And so it's really important for me to follow my sacral response, because when I do, it's the same thing where if I run into okay, the hardest thing about not initiating, the hardest thing of waiting to respond is to bear the ambiguity and to bear the confusion for long enough. Like, for instance, this last weekend I went to Truth or Consequences. We wanted 5 people for the Pinta. I was thinking maybe you would go, but then you were sick from your COVID vax. I ended up getting sick from mine too, but I was okay. Anyway, there were only 4 of us, and people were asking, what about this person, what about that person? And I was having sacral no. Or just sacral nothing. Like sacral, I don't know. I mean, I don't really know how that would work. I can't really see it. I can't really imagine it. You know, whatever. And so then I was down in Albuquerque, and it was like 5:30, and I texted Chris, and he had just got off work. And I had mentioned to him before that I would be down there, and I wanted to sync up with him. And I said, hey, why don't you come to this? Truth or Consequences. Perfect. 5th person for our Penta. So I think the biggest thing for generators is opportunity cost. Because I could tell it bothered the other generators in the group, because they kept wanting to initiate, to know. And I was just like waiting, and then in the right timing, the right person just magically appeared. It was exactly the right timing. It worked out great. But it's like lost opportunity cost. Like, okay, I'll say that, these are 2 things, 2 kind of closing thoughts. This is a good place to close. So the reason I got a little triggered by Kevin's post earlier on Scorpio full moon and saying it's up to you to decide for yourself how to make your life, whatever, blah, blah. It's no choice in human design. That's the first thing. And the no choice is an active form of no choice, equivalent to Lacan's concept of subjective destitution, Jung's individuation, which is giving up all sorts of beliefs about yourself and so on. That's the first. Then the second is the one that we were really just talking about the waiting to, or the opportunity cost of, initiating, and what it really means to trust. And that's what it is for generators, but there's a version of this for every type. It really has to do with the trust in the experiment. And it's kind of the same thing. They go hand in hand. The trust in the experiment, the trust in following strategy and authority, is like the corollary to the subjective destitution, which is really the emasculation, or that's not really the word for it, but I'm using, that's like Lacan's term for it, because he calls it the symbolic castration of the ego. But it's what it really is the dethroning of the mind as the decision maker and putting the mind in its place. And that's what no choice means. It's a reminder to the mind that you're not in charge. And it's a direct confrontation with the Kevins of the world who say, remember, it's up to you to make Scorpio full moon into a good or a bad. It's how you see it. It's all in your whatever, and it's all what you do with it. And that it's all what you do with it makes the ego, or not only the ego, but really the mind, the personality go, I'm in charge and I can make decisions about the life. And no choice is a reminder, you're not really in charge. You don't really get to make those decisions. And then that's the corollary with the deepening into the experiment.
Isn't making that reminder to yourself kind of making a choice to make that reminder? Isn't assuming more of a passenger consciousness something that you're choosing to do?
Right. You don't have to. No, you don't have to I don't have to remind myself to have subjective destitution. Like, it's more like, okay, it's not even that. I would put it this way. It's when something happens, the mind has all of its reactive complexes, which are basically what Jung discovered when he called his psychology complex psychology. And those are buttons where somebody can push a button, doop, and suddenly you dance like a marionette. And there's 9 different ways you can dance, or actually there's 64, but there's 9 different general centers, 9 different buttons, and so there's basically this button pressing reactive thing that the mind does, and I think that goes hand in hand with the taking control of things. When you push the button, the mind goes, I'm in charge, and it's my responsibility to do this, and I'm going to take this action. It's my time to do this thing, and do. And the no choice is the reminder, you're not in charge. It's the reminder that the complex doesn't get to choose. The complex that's being activated at that particular moment in time is not the ultimate decision maker, and basically, so you don't choose. Okay, here's what it is. You don't necessarily choose to undertake the human design experiment. What happens is it gets in like a virus. And if it gets in like a virus, then what's going to happen is it's going to break the old ways that things used to work. And when it breaks the old ways things used to work, there's this ability to replace those ways with these new mechanisms that are actually following the laws of the Maya and the laws of your form and the laws and the absolute and so on, and the absolute of the Maya. And I really think that's kind of what happens is you're given, and that's why, Ra really targeted generators, because he said that for them it could be instant. You could meet them and talk to them for an hour and they could walk out the door and be in their experiment. And for others, he thought it took much, much longer. But even for generators, it takes a long time, and but also everyone's different, and it's not like I'm saying you should go around trying to remind yourself all the time and be like, my mind is crap, my mind is, it's not like that. It's more that
beat up the mind.
it's more that every time, it's not even, because I'm not even really thinking that much when I'm actually in my generator flow. I'm just like doing stuff, or I'm just, like there's all different ways of, right, there's all different, it's not even really, it's not there, there isn't this whole I have to act, or it's really, but it's also, it's not like some sort of state of no mind, because it's very engaged in the sense that for me, no choice is very much like a bitter truth, in the way that Jung talks about bitter truths as curatives for all of the neuroses. And so the neurosis is the misapplication of the energy, or really the being possessed, being possessed by a complex and so on. And so, a projector who's up at 5 a.m. amped up an undefined sacral, it's like seeing a ghost. It's like seeing a banshee. And someone who's an undefined solar plexus who's super amped up, it's like seeing a demon, You're seeing these transpersonal things through the amped up, undefined centers. And, it really is a practice to not act out of that. And that practice, sure, it might be easier if you have a defined route to resist the pressure, this or that, but believe me, it's hard for everyone. I mean, defined solar plexus people have to learn to not act high and low in their wave, but undefined solar plexus people have to learn while they're amplifying it, and they're not even designed or equipped to handle the emotional wave. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, no matter what, here's how I see it. You encounter human design, and you either get the virus or you don't, and if you get it, then you start to use the vocabulary, and the more you start to use the vocabulary, the more opportunities open up for you to work your way closer to the fractal line, because just because you were born in a certain fractal, I guess I'm using fractal line in two senses, but fractal line in the sense of the personality crystals, which is the conventional sense, right? You're still born like adjacent. You could be Ra's next door neighbor, but you still have to find him if you're a defined G, or you still have to be found through your discernment of your people if you're an undefined G. And so there's still this working your way up. I mean, I remember back in 2006, I was at a David Icke convention, and I didn't know any better. No, earlier 2006, 2004, whatever.
Wow.
Whenever he came to Seattle, I don't know when it was. And I didn't really believe all of his crazy stuff. I didn't really, I thought that he was probably insane, but I was really enjoying just how far out and trippy and what a massive cosmology he had. And I wasn't aware of any, I think now there have been anti-Semitic connections and so on, and I'm really saddened about that. I had no idea, at the time, but, I just thought, here's a freak. And here's a freak who has a lot of really weird stuff to say. Now, of course, that's evolved into QAnon, it's evolved into these really terrible things that I want nothing to do with. But of course, I was able to work my way out of that conspiratorial world, which was the same world as the alien world. Ross said he used to be fascinated by aliens. Classic transference for a desire being to the, your desire also. I used to love crop circles, and even though I thought, I used to try to figure out how people did them, and I did think most of them were shams, and but it was fun. I mean, I have gate 4. I mean, I'm constantly skeptical and doubting and trying to come up with answers, and what could a possible answer for this be, and I was trying to be certain, but how could I be certain? I think it's scammers, but how could I be certain it's scammers? Maybe it's aliens. I think it's not aliens, but maybe it is aliens, but then how can I be certain it's not them? So my undefined head always trying to be certain and thinking about all this stuff. But I guess what I'm saying is, when I first heard of Human Design in 2006, I didn't have anything to do with it. It took me 9 years. But through those 9 years, now I was already into Jung, so it's funny. I had like a head start thanks to close family friends like our friend Kevin, who gave me really advanced Jungian books as an early teen, and I was able to kind of dive into the depths of Jungian psychology and have this advanced preview. But still, in my late teens and early 20s and so on, I was getting into everything the internet had to offer and reading about the weirdest stuff I could, from the full gamut of conspiracies to the full gamut of New Age to the full gamut of mystical. I discovered Barry Long, who does have some very proto-human design things. I discovered U.G. Krishnamurti at that time, who has some very proto-human design things. So there were preparatory phases to understanding human design cosmology, but by and large I was completely lost, right? Except for maybe a little bit of Jung and personality typology and things like that. But anyway, there were these phases and developments. And I did kind of crawl my way closer to the mutation, because I realized at the David Icke conference, these aren't my people. And I'm looking around as these are not really my people, And then I found the synchro-mysticism people, Goro Adachi, who's really into how his theory is that it's not actually conspiracies, it's all this like cosmic collective intelligence called Enki that communicates to you. It's almost kind of equivalent. It uses metaphors of artificial intelligence to describe itself, because it is the hyper intelligence or God head, of the cosmos, and it communicates through synchronicity. And I loved all this stuff. You've had your own. You would go to theosophical meetings, I know, and study theosophy.
That was good prep for human design.
Oh, it's great. Ra had very similar prep. He was living in a theosophical thing, and he probably was a reincarnation of William Quan Judge. Oh, yeah. Anyone who's watching, look up William Quan Judge and tell me that's not Ra. Quan. But okay, well, we should wrap it up. I think I said everything I wanted to. I guess my final closing thoughts were just wanting to say that no choice to me means exactly the opposite of Kevin's "you're in charge of your life." It means accepting that when something happens, you didn't have a choice about that happening, and you don't have a choice about the buttons it's pushing in you, and you don't really have a choice about any of it, but in waiting to respond if you're a generator, or waiting for emotional clarity if you're emotional, or trusting your spleen, or whatever it is that you've started doing, as you watch yourself do that, literally you can see that, or you just wait if you can't do that. If you're unable to do strategy and authority, you just wait, right? If you're not able to be emotionally clear, you wait, but even a generator, if you're not able to have a single response, you just don't do anything. And so a lot of time, like in an extremely emotionally triggering circumstance where I would have been played like a fiddle, now I'm just neutral and just watching and observing, and actually like genuinely surprised and go, oh wow, I wasn't expecting the emotion to actually, we had a mutual friend, I won't say who I had a falling out with, and he's emotionally defined and had a very big emotional reaction towards me, and I was waiting to see how I felt and the complexity of the emotions. Maybe there's some regret, but then maybe it's overwhelmed by the feeling of, nah, that was fine. And then maybe there's a little bit of, sadness, but then maybe that's overwhelmed by the feeling of satisfaction that I had integrity to stand up for who I am. All of these emotions that I'm going through, I'm not acting on. And I'm emotionally undefined. No matter what, we live in an emotional world. Everyone has to go through that experience, no matter what, and no matter what your type is. And so I just feel like the no choice is such... is such a thing that really is just, it's pointing at the mechanistic quality of it. There's no choice in the mechanism. Then the corollary on the other side of it was really just the, what was the other thing we were talking about? The second one, I was saying it's the other side of it, is basically just, I was using the generator example of the opportunity cost, but it really is any type. Any type has an opportunity cost. If you initiate with your mind, even if you're a manifestor and you're designed to initiate and you don't, you're not doing it at the right timing and with the right clarity or the right ego, willpower, and so on, or however it is for you, splenic, that's still going to, you're going to miss out on opportunities because, here's an example. I know someone who's emotional and who I told should probably stop being, he was saying he had so many relationship problems because he will, and this is, he's a young guy, early 20s, and he's dating a lot and he's having all these relationship problems, and I said, well, you need to wait for emotional clarity before you're intimate with somebody. And he goes, oh, no, that's, how do I know if I like them unless we're intimate? And I'm like, no, that's the opposite. You need to wait to know if you like them before you're intimate. And he's like, yeah, but I'm a young guy, I gotta see, he's 3'5". He's like, I gotta see what things are like. And I'm like, so what happens is then you're intimate before you're clear, before you're emotionally clear, and then it falls apart. And I said, well, look, he's like, it doesn't really seem to be causing any problems though. And I said, well, look, it's debatable whether or not it'll cause any problems in the cases where you don't actually care about that person, where you realize through emotional clarity that you don't like them, because that's all that's happened for you. Where you have again and again and again, oh, I actually don't really like this person, never mind, I don't really like this person. But what if somebody you really, really like, then you're going to regret having rushed the intimacy, because the intimacy would have happened anyway, but it would have happened at the right timing.
Right.
And then
totally.
where otherwise it will forever have been rushed, and you will forever have been robbed of having the experience of getting to know each other, which would have led to a deeper first experience
right.
of that intimacy.
Yes. That's
So
very true.
anyway, that's nice. That's a nice rant to end on. That's kind of in line with the whole opportunity cost thing. And
I always say you miss the buses that you're not supposed to catch.
oh my! Look at this. This is a nice ending. Woo! Hell yeah! Nice. You missed the buses. You missed the buses. Never mind. You missed the buses. Never mind. Thanks for watching. Peace out.